Good morning, friends. Today I just want to reinforce the basic conclusion from this past Sunday's message, which is that the job that God has given us is really a very simple one. Now, that's not the same thing as saying it's easy, because God never promised us an easy life. He promised us a good life, an abundant life, but he never said we would have that good and abundant life without hardship. But it is so very important for us to remember that we have a simple task to receive that good and abundant life, which is, you won't be surprised to hear, seeking first the kingdom of God and his righteousness. Now, again, I won't harp on what that means. I've done that enough. We submit to him as king. We desire his will more than our own, and so on. But I did want to point out that this simple assignment, this simple task or focus is really reinforced for us throughout the scriptures. And for just one example of that, I want to take you to Proverbs chapter 3. Because throughout the first several chapters of the book of Proverbs, Solomon is imploring his audience to consider the value and virtue of wisdom. And all true wisdom originates in God himself. And so in Proverbs 3:21 we read, "My son, do not lose sight of these. Keep sound wisdom and discretion, and they will be life for your soul and adornment for your neck." So Solomon has been describing wisdom, all the incredible benefits of wisdom, and that wisdom comes from God. And then he says, do not lose sight of these. And that is the brass tack simplicity of what it means to live according to wisdom. It simply requires us to not lose sight of the truth, to not lose sight of wisdom and discretion. And discretion is simply putting wisdom into action, actually making the right choice rather than the wrong choice based on wisdom. So do not lose sight of these. Keep sound wisdom and discretion, and they will be a life for you and adornment for your neck. And it may not seem so at first, but that is pretty much the same promise we have in Matthew 6:33 when we're told, seek first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and all these things will be added to you. Because the kingdom of God, as we've explained, is the rule of God, the reign of God. So to seek his kingdom is to seek a situation where God is fully in charge of the whole earth, and most certainly fully in charge of what we do. To seek his righteousness then is to submit to his righteous standard and then live accordingly. And these are the same pursuits as what Solomon urges us to do there in the Proverbs, because once again, all wisdom comes from God. And the most fundamental line of that wisdom that comes to us over and over again in the Proverbs is trust in the Lord with all your heart and do not lean on your own understanding. In other words, submit to the Lord, submit to his leadership, his rule, his reign, his direction, his standards, his righteousness, rather than your own. Leaning upon your own understanding will lead to ruin, frustration, and yes, anxiety. But trusting fully in the Lord, keeping that wisdom and discernment in mind, will lead to life for your soul and an adornment for your neck. Do you see the similarities between Proverbs 3 and Matthew 6? And that is speaking about not only life, but a life that is adorned there in Proverbs 3. A life that is more than just existing. A life that is more than mere survival. The wisdom of God, submitting to God in trust, leads to what Jesus called abundant life. He came to give people life that they should have it abundantly. Now, that abundant life, that adorned life, as we said before, is not necessarily a life of luxury, not necessarily a life of ease, but it will be a life that is good, a life that experiences joy and confidence and hope and peace and excitement for the future that's yet to come. And once again, when we consider the choice before us, whether the treasures of earth that might grant a life of ease right now, but will one day be done and over with and come to nothing, or a life focused on the wisdom of God, leading to the treasures of heaven, which means this life right now might not be as easy, might not be as full of the stuff, but it is full of the things that people are actually looking for amongst the stuff. The things like peace and confidence and joyful anticipation of even better things yet to come. And all of that, from this vantage point, the answer there is easy. What is the use of all the stuff if you have no peace? What is the use of a life of ease if you have no joyful anticipation of what's to come, right? And it all starts and is maintained. The correct perspective is maintained by a very simple directive. And it's consistent throughout the scriptures, as we've seen. Seek first the kingdom of God and his righteousness. Do not lose sight of sound wisdom and discretion. Set your mind on the things above where Christ is. that we would walk in his ways and keep his statutes and commands. These are references to scriptures from all over the Bible, and they're all pointing us to the same simple truth. If we are willing to give ourselves over completely to the Lord, trusting him, seeking him, obeying him, he then will guide us and provide for us and take care of every need that we have. So let's truly focus on what our job is, what we've been called to do, and let go of all the fear and anxiety that is attached to trying to do more than what he's actually called us to do. Because I forget who said it first, but a very wise person once drew attention to Matthew 11:28 and following, where Jesus said, "Come to me, all who labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and lowly of heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy, and my burden is light." And this wise person pointed out another simple fact. Jesus says that his yoke is easy, his burden is light, and that in coming to him, we would find rest for our souls. Therefore, if we have come to Jesus, and yet we are still being crushed with a heavy burden, well, that's not because Jesus was the one that put the burden on us. No, his burden is light. Therefore, if we're being crushed still, it's because we're putting on ourselves more than what Christ is requiring of us. Beloved brothers and sisters, do not put on yourself a burden that is greater than what Jesus has put on you. And so if we do rid ourselves of all the things that God says isn't our responsibility, the things that they're not our job, if we're willing to set those things aside, then we will realize just how easy the yoke of Christ is, just how light his burden really is compared to what we were saddling ourselves with. Know this and be encouraged. I love you. Have a good and godly day, and Lord willing, I'll see you Sunday.